The day my voice was stolen. It happened in front of everyone. The open floor office, the glass walls, the sound of keyboards, the fake smiles, all of it froze when he raised his voice. Ethan Cole. My boss. The man who once called me the backbone of this department. The same man who now stood before 40 employees, pointing at me like I was dirt on his perfect white shirt. "You're done, Madison," he said, his voice echoing across the room. "You're incompetent, careless, and frankly, I'm tired of cleaning up your mess." His words weren't just cruel, they were designed to humiliate. Every syllable was a public execution of my dignity. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat burned, my chest caved in, and I stood there, a storm trapped inside a silent woman. For years, I'd carried this company on my back. I worked late nights, fixed his errors, and gave credit away just to survive. But in one moment, he erased me. And he knew exactly what he was doing. He smiled after he said it. That faint, smug curve, the kind men wear when they believe they've won. When security escorted me out, my coworkers looked away. Not one of them met my eyes. Their silence screamed louder than Ethan's words ever could. Outside, the cold wind hit me hard. My ID badge, still warm from my neck, hung useless in my hand. I stood in that parking lot, trembling, not from the weather, but from betrayal. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in my apartment staring at my reflection, the same reflection that used to carry pride, now hollow. I replayed the humiliation, over and over, until the pain turned into something else. Something darker. Rage. Not the kind that screams or breaks things. The quiet kind. The kind that calculates. I started digging. I knew Ethan's reputation, charming, powerful, the golden boy of coal and green media. But behind that perfect PR smile, I'd seen cracks. I'd seen the invoices that didn't match, the fake signatures, the hush-hush transfers that vanished into thin air. I never said a word back then, because survival in that office meant silence. Now, silence was no longer my strategy. I opened my laptop and began pulling every file I'd ever saved, every report I'd backed up, every email he'd ever sent me. Each one was a piece of a puzzle I was finally ready to finish. Ethan didn't just fire me. He fired the only person who knew where his secrets were buried. And I wasn't just going to make him regret it, I was going to make the world watch him fall, the same way he made them watch me crumble. But revenge is never quick. It's patient. It waits for the right stage, the right audience, the right strike. So, I disappeared, not from the city, not from life, but from the version of myself that used to beg for approval. The Madison he humiliated died that day in the office. The woman who rose after her, she was born for one purpose. To bring Ethan Cole to his knees. And when I was done, no one would remember his power. Only his downfall. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come from the law. It comes from the woman you underestimated. The excavation. She learned to work in the dark. Not because she wanted to hide, but because truth sometimes needs shade to grow into something that can no longer be ignored. Madison's kitchen table became a crime scene, stacks of printed spreadsheets, highlighter scars on contract pages, a laptop with a cracked corner and a history of late-night rescues. The apartment smelled of burnt coffee and the metal tang of adrenaline. Close up on her hands, fingers that used to sign off on budgets now traced ledgers like a detective reading a confession. Each line item was a heartbeat, vendor names rearranged like false identities, dates rewritten, wire transfers that hopped from shell companies to accounts that led nowhere. There was an art to following money. She had learned that art across a decade of loyal work and kept it hidden in a drawer marked personal. Now she dug it out like a weapon. She moved systematically. She rebuilt the timeline Ethan wanted buried. Emails she had archived, notes she had scribbled in meetings, an offhand comment in a quarterly report, small things that, when assembled, formed a pattern impossible to explain away. The camera lens of her mind zoomed in on anomalies, reimbursements approved before the travel even happened, invoices altered after the fact, signatures that never matched anyone's real hand. The office that once felt like a nest now looked like a stage where he performed control. Madison didn't trust the law yet. She had seen how smooth men in suits could straighten a story until it fit whatever narrative protected them. So she built a parallel justice, verifiable, shareable, incapable of being silenced by legal muscle or corporate PR. She learned to package proof like a filmmaker packages truth, pacing, reveal, soundtrack. Every file needed context, a timestamp, a face. She turned spreadsheets into stories and stories into proof. She found allies in small, dangerous places. A former accountant named Carlos, who had been let go quietly 2 years ago, sent a message that read like a confession and like an admission of fear. A junior developer, quiet and loyal once, offered backups he'd kept on a personal drive because he didn't trust the servers. A temp who had been humiliated in a meeting gave her the name of the offshore vendor that literally existed only on paper. These were tiny beacons of courage, brittle, easily broken, but together they formed a fragile bridge. She built an anonymous persona to carry the weight of the reveal, a voice that sounded like everyone's anger, not just hers. She wrote a script in the language of outrage and evidence, a 2-minute narrative that would not ask anyone to believe her blindly, it would show them, file by file, trace by trace. The first video had to be airtight. She rehearsed the cadence in her head, imagined the slow pan across spreadsheets, the close-up on a forged signature, the overlay of dates that contradicted press releases. The aim was not to entertain but to indict. Nights blurred into mornings. She learned to read the dark like a map, the positions of streetlights, the cafe that opened at dawn, the one journalist who answered anonymized tips. Rachel Moore, a name that lived in late-night searches, had written about corporate corruption before and had the kind of taste for truth that didn't bend when money tried to sway it. Madison drafted an encrypted packet and did not send it blindly. She tested leaks on small forums, watched how narratives formed, and tightened every loose end. But excavation is noisy. The deeper you dig, the more likely someone notices the fresh dirt. Surveillance in the building had cameras on every stairwell, every elevator. Ethan's assistant liked to log names into calendars as a way of controlling the room. The people she'd once worked shoulder to shoulder with were still inside that glass box, and the smallest misstep could ripple outward until it hit her like a tidal wave. She set the release for a Tuesday at noon, the busiest corporate moment, the perfect audience. Her plan was surgical, a timed upload to a secure server, an encrypted link to Rachel, and the distribution of a single, undeniable narrative that would be impossible for HR to mop up with a generic condolence email. She imagined the world watching the camera she built, the slow exposure of his misdeeds, the arc from celebrated leader to unmasked thief. On the morning of the release, she sat at her table and watched the upload bar crawl. The city outside her window was indifferent, commuters, honking taxis, the steady pulse of a place that had no idea a reckoning was being born in a small apartment. Her phone vibrated once, twice. A message preview appeared and then vanished before she read it. She told herself not to look, that staying calm was part of the strategy. Curiosity won. She opened the notification. It was not an email, nor a reply from Rachel. It was a social media alert. Ethan's profile had posted a new announcement at 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes before her upload would complete. The post was all smiles and shareholder wins, a glossy photo of Ethan in a suit that seemed to wink at the cameras. Comments poured in with praise, the image of a man untroubled. Her heart sank for a moment, the way a diver feels at the lip of a cliff. Then another message slid into her inbox, anonymous and cold, "We've seen your activity. Don't make a mistake." The screen blurred. For the first time since she decided to fight, Madison felt the temperature of real danger. The excavation had unearthed more than documents, it had stirred eyes and ears that could not be predicted. She stared at the upload bar, at the timer that would make her into a witness and a target at the same instant, and realized that once she hit send, there would be no turning back. The leak that shook the glass tower. The upload hit 0 at 12 o'clock sharp. Madison's heart thudded once, hard, like the sound before a storm. Then silence. For a second, nothing happened. No explosion, no alerts, just the hum of her laptop fan. But she knew, once the first link spread, it would multiply faster than truth ever had a chance to breathe. She leaned back, eyes locked on the screen, waiting. Then her phone buzzed, a notification from an unknown source. A journalist's post, anonymous documents expose financial fraud at Coal and Green Media, sources confirm data is authentic. It had begun. Within minutes, hashtags started trending. Within an hour, stock prices trembled. By the afternoon, every major business outlet had picked up the story. The man who fired her publicly was now the one being stripped of credibility, publicly. Ethan Cole's name was everywhere. His grin, that picture-perfect corporate smile, now sat beside words like fraud, embezzlement, investigation. The same faces that clapped when she was humiliated were now reposting his downfall with outrage, pretending they hadn't looked away that day. Madison didn't celebrate. She just watched. Quietly. She'd imagined revenge as fire, wild, loud, uncontrollable. But this felt colder. Precise. Like winter swallowing sound. She sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through the chaos she'd created. Rachel, the journalist, had released the files exactly as promised, with dates, emails, signatures, and the internal reports Madison had pieced together. The proof was undeniable. By evening, Ethan held a press conference. He looked shaken, pale under the studio lights. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by the desperate calm of a man cornered. He denied everything, called it a smear campaign, an attack by disgruntled ex-employees. But Madison had planned for that, too. As his speech aired, her second upload went live, a video compilation of voice recordings, time-stamped, his own words admitting the cover-ups, laughing about creative accounting. It spread across platforms like wildfire. By the time he left that press room, his world had cracked. Investors pulled funding. The board froze his accounts. The same building where he'd once fired her now turned its glass walls into his cage. Still, Madison didn't smile. Not yet. Revenge wasn't complete until truth reached its final circle, until he knew exactly who had done this. That night, as city lights flickered beyond her window, she received an email. No name, no signature. Just a single line. We know it was you. He wants to meet. Her pulse stopped. She read it twice, 3 times. It wasn't from Ethan, but it came from inside the company's domain. She closed her laptop slowly, her breath shallow, her reflection faint in the dark glass. Revenge had a cost. And it had just started collecting. The confrontation. She hadn't planned to see him again. Not after everything burned. Not after the world had already witnessed his ruin. But the message sat in her inbox like a pulse. He wants to meet. For hours, Madison paced her apartment, the night pressing heavy against the windows. What could he possibly want? An apology? A confession? Or something darker, a threat to reclaim control, the only thing he ever valued? She almost deleted the message. Almost. But curiosity has its own gravity, and revenge doesn't end just because the world clapped. Sometimes, the final act happens in silence, with no audience left to cheer. The meeting place was strange, not an office, not a restaurant, but an abandoned riverside cafe where Cole and Green used to host company retreats. The irony felt deliberate. Madison arrived at dusk, her breath misting in the cold. The air smelled like wet concrete and rain. Through the cracked glass windows, she saw him, Ethan Cole, the man who once towered over every meeting, now a shadow of himself. His suit hung loose, his face pale and sleepless. He didn't speak at first. Just stared. His eyes, once full of arrogant certainty, now carried something new, fear wrapped in disbelief. I knew it was you, he finally said, his voice low. Who else could have pulled this off? Madison stood still. No words, no flinch. He stepped closer, his shoes echoing against the empty floor. You destroyed me, he whispered. Everything I built. She met his gaze, her tone steady, almost calm. You built it on lies, Ethan. I just turned the lights on. He laughed, hollow and bitter. You think you've won? The world moves on. They always do. But me? I'll rebuild. You'll see. Madison tilted her head, a faint smirk at the corner of her mouth. Then rebuild with truth this time. Or don't bother. He took another step forward, close enough that she could see the tremor in his hand. You don't understand, he said, voice breaking. They're not just coming after me. They're coming after everyone tied to this. There are people involved who won't stop where the headlines did. A chill ran down her spine. She wanted to ask who he meant, but his eyes darted toward the window, like he was afraid to say more. Then he handed her a small flash drive. You wanted the truth, he muttered. Here. Take it. But when you see what's on it, you'll wish you hadn't. Before she could respond, he walked past her, shoulders heavy, steps unsteady. Outside, the sound of an engine started, then faded into the distance. Madison stood alone in the empty cafe, the flash drive cold in her hand. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Her reflection in the dusty glass looked foreign, a woman caught between triumph and terror. She slipped the drive into her pocket and whispered under her breath, "What have you done, Ethan?" Back home, she stared at her laptop, the cursor blinking, daring her to open the files. Her pulse throbbed in her neck as she dragged the drive into her system. A folder appeared, one word on it, collateral. She double-clicked. Inside were dozens of names, employees, clients, journalists, all connected to the scandal. But there was one name that made her freeze. Her own. Labeled under a subfolder, Control. And beneath it, videos, audio logs, emails she'd never sent, fake bank transfers under her name. It hit her like a punch. Ethan hadn't just prepared for exposure. He'd built a backup plan, one that could take her down with him. The headlines that destroyed him could now destroy her too. As the screen glowed in the darkness, Madison realized something terrifying. She hadn't just taken down a corrupt man. She had stepped into the middle of a much bigger war. And whoever stood behind Ethan Cole, they weren't done yet. The fall and the rise. For a long moment, Madison couldn't move. The room felt smaller with the glow of that single folder, Control. Every fake transaction, every fabricated email, every shred of digital poison pointed straight at her. Ethan hadn't built a safety net, he'd built a trap, a coffin with her name already etched on the lid. Her breath came sharp and shallow. She'd wanted revenge, not this. Not another nightmare dressed in power suits and forged data. But that's the thing about revenge, it never ends clean. It spills, it infects, it rewrites who you become. Madison didn't cry. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and opened the next file. It was a recording, Ethan's voice again, weary, frightened. "If you're hearing this, it means everything's fallen apart. They'll erase us both to cover the trail. Don't trust anyone at the top. Especially not Green." Her eyes widened. Green, as in Cole and Green Media. Ethan had been the face, Jonathan Green had always been the shadow, the silent investor no one questioned. Now it made sense. The fraud, the secrecy, the money trails that disappeared offshore, they didn't end with Ethan. They ended with Green. For a second, she almost laughed, bitterly. The story wasn't about a boss anymore. It was about an empire. Madison copied everything. Then she picked up her phone and called Rachel. When Rachel answered, her voice was low, cautious. "Madison, do you know what you've started? The federal office is moving in. Cole's under protective watch. They think someone's after him." "I know," Madison replied quietly. "And if I'm right, I'm next." There was a pause. Then Rachel's voice steadied. "Send me everything. All of it. We'll make sure it sees daylight." That night, Madison didn't sleep. She encrypted the drive, split its contents into fragments, and uploaded them to multiple sources, secure servers, journalists, whistleblower archives. If they wanted to bury her, they'd have to bury the truth first. By morning, chaos broke loose again. News anchors reported sealed warrants, missing executives, sudden resignations at Cole and Green. The story had outgrown Ethan. Now it had teeth. But Ethan himself, he was gone. No trace, no sighting, no statement. Some said he fled. Others whispered he was silenced. Madison didn't know which to believe. Weeks passed. Investigators reached out to her, and Rachel's story spread like wildfire. Madison wasn't painted as the villain, she was the woman who'd pulled the mask off an empire. The whistleblower who made the world watch. Yet inside, she carried no victory. Only quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes after surviving your own fire. One evening, she walked to the same riverside cafe, now boarded up, forgotten. She stood by the window where Ethan once stood and looked at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. Her eyes were different now, not angry, not broken. Just awake. She whispered into the cold air, not as confession but as release. "You took my voice. I made sure the world heard it." She turned and walked away, her footsteps soft against the cracked floor. Behind her, The sun was setting, orange light spilling across the water, washing over the ruins of what once was power. And for the first time in years, Madison felt peace, not because she'd won, but because she'd finally stopped fighting to be seen by men who never deserved her loyalty. The world had watched his fall. Now, quietly, it would watch her rise.